from your perspective about the issues that impact on our community. What do you feel is the priority issue right now? Ann Tripp.
Yeah, well, I know the judge said that drug use is a form of slavery, a new form of slavery. I also think that not voting is a form of slavery. When you negate yourself, when you make yourself a nothing, when you allow yourself to not be viewed as anything because you do not vote, that is a form of slavery, because when we were enslaved, we were nothing. So anybody who does not vote is nothing. I cannot express that strong to you. Okay? Drug use is self-medication. Not voting, you want to be a slave. You want to be counted as nothing. And this year, more than any other year, you've got to stand up, show up, or shut up. Woo!
Bob Slade.
All right. Thank you very much for coming out, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just say, before I start rambling here for a second, I got to give props to the sister to my right, Miss Ann Tripp, because she was with us during the days of Week in Review and Open Line when we took on the Central Park 5 case. As a matter of fact, here's an interesting story. Ann was with me when late reporter Joe Bragg came back to the radio station and said, "You guys are not going to believe what I have." This is before the start of the first trial. He said, "I have an FBI lab report." And he showed us the FBI lab report, and it did not connect any of the 5 boys to the jogger attack. There was no DNA on any of this stuff.
None.
And we went on the air and blasted that, right, Miss Ann?
That's right.
Yes, we did. And believe it or not, it stopped the first trial. They had to postpone the starting date for the first trial in the Central Park jogger case. Of course, the rest is history. But Ann was along for that ride as well, and props to sister.
Thank you.
One of the things, yeah, come on, clap, come on, yeah, come on.
Thank you.
Let me just say this. The thing that I'm going to really talk about a lot is the community-police relationship. It's gone to pot. Thank goodness Bill Braden is out of here, all right, because he did not believe in community policing.
That's right.
When I was a kid, growing up, we had that. We knew the names of the cops. The cops knew us. They knew our families. Today, they don't know you from a hole in the wall. I have family, members of NYPD, my Uncle Tommy, in Roxbury, Massachusetts. I have a cousin who's still working for the police department up there. And it's back then when they worked, and he still does, my cousin Rudy, but you had that relationship with the people. Not anymore. Cops don't know the folks, people don't know. We can help you solve crimes, but yet NYPD treats us all like we're the bad guys and bad girls. That's got to stop, and we're going to talk about that today. Thank you.
All right, Cassandra, give us your thoughts.
So I'd have to disagree with what you said, Ann. I think when we're talking about drug policy, and we know that drug policy, so the laws associated with the drugs, are what I think has created the conversation around the new Jim Crow and about the conversation of what slavery has done. I'm not going to sit here and talk about how drugs can be the healthiest things. Taking drugs is not like drinking water. However, the harms associated with drugs are far less than the harms associated with the laws connected to the drugs. And we know that to be true because the drug laws are not enforced the same way in white communities, and you know that because the opioid crisis does not look like the crack crisis. They're not busting in people's houses, they're not incarcerating people. And when we talk about voting, we are missing a large group of people because we've incarcerated so many people and they no longer have the right to vote. So the conversation about what we need to talk about with the black community is the way that the system has created mass criminalization. Everyone talks about incarceration, but there are people dealing with the very effects of incarceration that have never stepped a foot in jail or prison. Those are people that have to pee in a cup so they can get food stamps. Those are people that get searched before they get into schools. We have to have a real conversation about the ways that the drug war and over-criminalization and over-policing have literally created a paradigm for a police state and militarization of people of color.
All right, thank you very much.
I should say both to Ann and Cassandra, that's what I mean about the drug situation being a new form of slavery. As a judge, I saw that over and over and over again in the disparity. I have not yet seen it, but Ava DuVernay, the producer of Selma,
13.
has done 13
Yes.
on Netflix, and that is the subject of the overmass incarceration of black people, particularly black men, and what that does, that I hope we'll touch on today, Bob, is what that does not only for this generation of men who are incarcerated, but what are the implications for their generations to follow?
Yeah, and I just want to say we talk a lot about black men, and that's very important. But in a room full of black women, it's very important to realize that the conversation has to be broader. That's why I don't specifically focus on mass incarceration, because the face of that has been black men. But when you broaden the frame and talk about mass criminalization, all the systems that women are interacting with, there's a level of criminalization that happens, and black women are the rate of black women incarceration is rising way faster than anyone's ever talking about. So we really need to broaden out the frame and add a gendered analysis to what we're talking about.
All right, Bishop Ferguson, let's hear your thoughts.
Well, first of all, it's amazing to me to sit here because two of the people who have over the years informed my thoughts and my work are sitting right here at the end of this table, and Ann Tripp and Bob Slade. Because I listened to them on the radio while I was serving 9 years in New York State prisons. So I didn't fall from heaven. I didn't come to become a bishop because I got saved one Sunday morning while the sun was shining brightly through the stained glass windows. I got saved on Rikers Island on February 11th, 1991, having served 1 year and 6 days of what became an 8-year and 8-month stay as a not so welcome guest of the New York State Department of Corrections. And the two issues that I think affect us most, that I think that I'm focusing my work on, are economics and education. Because while I was in prison, everybody was poor like me. Everybody came from the same neighborhoods that I came from. The folks who sat in the visiting rooms looked like me. The men who were locked in A Block in Sing Sing looked like me. And all the women who came to visit them looked like my mama, looked like my wife. And the babies that came there looked like my daughter. And the common denominator in all of that is we were black and we were poor. So economics is the number one thing, because I believe that as we can march, and as Reverend Sharpton said when I worked for him, he used to say marching doesn't solve anything. Marching is to bring highlights to the problems so that we can begin to solve them. So yeah, we could continue to march, but at the same time, we have to understand that until we go in these folks' pockets, until they understand that as a nation of black people, we're going to use our multi-trillion-dollar power of spending that we have, that we engage in, because y'all do some shopping. Hey, come on now. Black folks love to shop. But if we were to say that from November through December, from what the so-called Black Friday all the way through Christmas, that we don't spend not one nickel above food, above transportation, above all the things that we just need to be able to go back and forth to work, I can tell you, I don't care who comes in office. It could be Trump, it could be Hillary, it could be Bernie, it could be yippee yappy and yahooey. Whoever comes into office in January is going to say what do they want, because the big corporations will pressure them into doing something different. And the only way we do that is we have to be educated. We should educate ourselves informally by watching things like Ava's documentary 13. We need to educate ourselves by reading things like the new Jim Crow. We need to educate ourselves because what we're seeing today is a whole political campaign run by a horrible person, a horrible orange man, and orange is not the new black, that is saying to us today that if you are not educated, I will play on your fear. If you've never read a book, I will play on your fear. If you don't know, if you're not woke because you ain't never read nothing above a tweet and above 140 characters, above something that's on Facebook, I will play on your fear and I will get you to vote, because what we're seeing is the fulcrum moving in the other way, because the pendulum is swinging the other way as the result of a black man that went to the White House 8 years ago.
Bishop Ferguson, amen. Let's hear amen. Outstanding, Bishop, outstanding. And the next person we want to hear from, but he's outstanding, Brother Ebro from
How you
Hot
doing there?
97.
First, I'd like to request my seat be moved. I don't think raise your hand if you're under 35 in this room. Now, that's the problem. That's a problem. There's not enough young people in this room.
What should be our next question?
Raise your hand if you have kids. Did you bring your young people to this room?
What's your feeling about it?
Everything you've heard today is about accountability and responsibility.
Okay.
The power that we have is on us. And I know my elders, when I was coming up, were tired of hearing that black people were in a predicament that was unfixable, or this one was doing this to us, and we are not able to get out of the predicament we're in because of someone else. Some of it is true, but some of it is false. And based on what this reverend right here just said about economics and about power of economics, we have the power to take control of our neighborhoods. We have the power to buy buildings, start businesses, support one another. The question is, when are we going to start doing it? I agree with everything said up here. I can't get up here and disagree because we have to be able to do all of these things at the same time. I know we start to feel like there's too many items on the list. Every day it's a new item. Drugs, unemployment, gentrification, Black Lives Matter. Who's not voting, who is voting, right? All of these things go on our list, right? Broken homes, fathers in jail, sons in jail, daughters on drugs. So the list gets very long. But until we start to take action for ourselves and stop waiting for someone because they're not coming to save us. I don't know how many times they're going to tell us, show us, treat us bad, kick us when we're down, kill us for no reason. How many times have we seen the same thing we're seeing today? It's just now everybody has a camera phone. Right? So we got to stop acting like this is brand new information. This is not new information. It's not brand new. And we got to stop acting like it's brand new if we're going to make some changes. And we got to stop acting like we don't have the power to activate and take back our local community. Right? We could sit and talk about voting, but until we get active in our local communities, on our block, in our churches, with our assemblymen, we're not going to see the change that we want. Until we're going to the parent and teacher nights, meeting the teacher, making sure the teacher knows that we're available, taking control of our children's lives. Listen, I know it's rough. The music we play on the radio is not helping parents. It's not. And it never has. It never has. In any generation, they always complained about the music. But what about us in the home? How many of us are actually active in the home every night, sitting down, reading a book, having a conversation, singing a song? Just sing a song with your kids every once in a while. Take them to the park, run around for no reason, right? We have to be active in our children's lives so that 30 years from now, we can start to see change, because change isn't going to happen next week. Change ain't gonna happen when we get the next president in there. It's not. It's just not. I'm being honest with y'all. So we can continue to have these conversations, and we must. But it's gonna take us a generation to make the changes that we want to see.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's start with you, Bob. The next president. We've been talking about an election season. I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime, and I hope, although I plan to live to be at least 105, I hope I don't see anything like this again. Well, how do we really articulate and hold the next president of the United States accountable for the concerns that we as Black people have in this nation?
Okay, this is a good one. Fasten your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen. All right, here
That's
we go.
why I started with you, Bob.
Okay, here we go. On a number of levels. First off, like Brother said, orange is not the new black. All right, so we know that's one thing. Donald Trump is not going to be president of the United States. All right? And if we go out and vote, cast our vote, make sure that doesn't happen. One of the things he said when he was talking, building up his campaign, talking about law and order and reaching out to the black community, was that he was going to reinstitute stop and frisk, the 250s. That's what the police dialogue called it, 250s. Where you stop people, question them, and frisk them, just on the assumption they did something. What NYPD was doing was stopping all blacks and browns just because they think they look suspicious, or they were wearing sneakers that day, or whatever the deal was. I'm going to give you some facts here and some figures. By the way, the practice of stop and frisk, stop, question, and frisk was outlawed in the state of New York in 2012, and the practice was ended in 2013. Right. All right, I got some numbers right here in front of me. My four eyes are looking at them right now. Between 2004 and 2012, the NYPD stopped 4.4 million people. 87% of those stopped were blacks and Latinos. Only 12% were charged. 4.4 million people. We elected a new mayor, Mayor de Blasio, and he, along with the city council, decided we're going to end that practice, and they did. The practice is no longer in existence. That's what we have to do. We have to use the power of the vote.
That's right.
As Adam Clayton Powell said in 1967, what's in your hand? What's in your hand is the power of the vote. But not only for the top position, but also for those people who represent us, the city council people, and the state legislative people, and the members of Congress. If they're not doing the job, you take them out of office. You don't vote for them. That's what this is all about. That's the power. That's what's in your hand, the power of the vote. And you've got to utilize that. We keep throwing it away like it's nothing. We'll go into the voting booth and vote for the top of the ticket and forget about the rest of them. Come on. You got to wake up. It sounds like do the right thing. Wake up. But you have to do it. Come on. These other positions are very important. And not only that, I know we're busy. I know we can't always do all the things at community meetings and all that kind of stuff, but we have to be active in that. We have to take part in that. You're here now. This is a great starting point. You're here now. You're going to listen to some dialogue and take what you hear from here, pieces of it. You can't remember all of it, but take it back to your community, to the people that you live amongst, and tell them, yeah, I heard this, and this is what we can do. We can do that. If you don't, then you're just taking up space.
Whoa. Who wants to jump in next?
Can I add
I
something?
do.
I need to add something to that. In that, one of the things that we need to understand is that sentiment drives policy. I teach my young people at LaGuardia Community College, the sentiment drives policy. Policy isn't enacted because it makes sense. Policy is enacted because of the way people feel. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to change the way people feel. We have to change the way we feel about ourselves. So we have to address issues of white privilege. We have to address issues of black apathy. We have to address the fact that we have to eliminate the fallacy of black-on-black crime. And the reason I call it the fallacy of black-on-black crime, the black-on-black crime rate in America is 83%. The white-on-white crime rate is 76%. It's not a big difference. So black people kill black people and white people kill white people. So every time a black cop kills one of us, I'm saying, well, we need to stop killing each other. Yeah, we need to stop killing each other, but that doesn't give you an excuse to kill us. So what I'm saying is that our sentiment has to change. We are being victimized by a narrative that has been created 400 years ago. The same narrative that nobody wants to go see in Birth of a Nation. The same narrative that plays on white fear that in 1865, when they so-called freed the slaves, and they didn't really free the slaves, they just changed slavery from one form to another like matter. What they did was, and this narrative that these black slaves were going to enact justice on their white oppressors, that's why Remington and Smith & Wesson and all these companies companies became multi-billion-dollar corporations. That's why the NRA is what it is today, because of the way people feel, because we fear ourselves. People fear us, the fear of this big, angry black man. That's why Michael Brown could get shot down on the streets of Ferguson by a cop named Darren. I'm Darren Ferguson. Darren killed Michael in Ferguson. So what? So that's like God telling me that I got something to do, because we have to stop killing each other. This narrative of the angry black man and the angry black woman has to stop. This narrative that says that we are more prone to violence has to stop. This narrative that says that they can incarcerate us and a black boy's felony is a white boy's prank has to stop. And the only way it stops is we have to change it on a visceral level by how we feel about each other. And then once we change how we feel about each other, we can change how the world feels about us.
Bro, you want to chime in on that?
Thank you, Judge Hatchett. I want to add on to that as well. Information, learning, and I'm going to say it again. How many of us gather in our homes on a weekly basis and have conversations about our programming, our social programming, what has happened to us, right? Black Lives Matter is a very important thing, but it's also just another reminder that they can kill us and not go to jail. They're reminding us every day, and we're reminding each other that we're subservient, we're less than, we're begging to be accepted still. Please, white man, don't kill us no more, please, please. That is a part of the fabric of who we are as people. Think about that. That's been ingrained in this country. White supremacy is something that was promoted in this country. At the turn of the century, in the newspapers in this country, they used to talk about niggerology. It was the study of the nigger and how they were meant to be slaves. The population accepted it because they wanted to justify having humans work for free and be killed like animals if they didn't do their job. Right? That is a part of the fabric of who we are. And on a daily basis, if we're not conditioning ourselves and reconditioning our children and learning about these things, that is the disservice we're doing ourselves. And then think about the food that we eat. Think about the food that we eat. How many of us in this room have a family member suffering with some sort of heart disease, cholesterol, something? How many of us? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Most of the room.
Yes.
And we continue to eat the same food. I know it's hard. I know it's hard. But that food is also clouding your ability to think clear. It is clouding your ability to control your emotions and your children to control their emotions. You send your child at 4 years old off to school with some synthetic food and some juicy juice. And then they tell you, oh, your kid act wild in class. You ain't give them no real food. Then the next thing, they want to pump your kid full of some pills.
Right.
And then when the kid turn 18, we wonder why they got emotional disorders. And then we can't afford the prescription drugs.
Right.
So then what happens? The kid is acting wild in the street and they go to jail. They setting us up every time. Flint, Michigan, how many of us are making sure we keep track that in 10 years from now, all them little black kids in that city that have been poisoned, all the kids that in Newark that have been poisoned, 10 years from now, they're going to have behavioral problems. Then a pharmaceutical company is going to come along and say, we got some drugs for y'all. And then you can't afford the drugs, so you're acting crazy in the street. And then what happens? You get put in jail. Wake up.
All right.
Woo, our 10
Excellent.
years from now, these children have forms of cancer and all kind of medical conditions that they go, oh, well, you know what happened. And you and Cassandra want to chime in?
Yeah, and Judge, and then they get us when we're old, if we manage to live old enough. We don't. We die before we get our Social Security. Black people die before we get our Social Security. We don't live to get there. We don't live to 66. We don't live to 67. Again, I'm glad Ebro brought up the food. Too much junk, too many carbohydrates. We get diabetes, kidney disease, too much drinking, and drugs. But I want to talk just really briefly, Judge, about the vote again. A very good example
Sure, please do.
District Attorney Ken Thompson has died. Yes, very,
50
very
years
young.
old,
50.
right? 50?
But this is the point. We had Charles Hines as the district attorney of Brooklyn for over 20 years. Everybody thought he was just fabulous. Ken Thompson was elected. Again, we had to go and elect him. No one thought he was going to beat Hines because Hines had the machine behind him and a lot of Brooklyn. But black folks voted him in. And he didn't even serve out his whole term. But in 3 years, he got 21 people exonerated who were in jail who shouldn't have been there. How did he get in office? We voted him in. I am telling you, you have to vote. And yes, people who have been incarcerated, a lot of them, when they finish their incarceration, they can vote, but they don't know because no one's going to tell them that in many states you can vote after you've served your term. So we really do, I know I sound like a broken record, but voting is so very important. And in this year, with this orange man, if we go about our way and think, oh, well, he's not going to be elected, I agree with Bob. I don't think he's going to be elected. But I don't want you to think that. I want you to think if I don't get to the polls that day, this man will be president. I want you to think that. I want you to tell your friends that. I want you to tell everybody you know that. When I was young, my parents would not let me go out with a guy who did not vote. My parents did not play that. My father, unfortunately, was a Republican. My mother was a Democrat. They did not let me date fellows who did not vote. Women.
It's true.
This is a room full of women. Women, we can change this dynamic. We can change the dynamic of crime and drugs and all that. You know why? Because men, young men, they want drugs and fast cars and all that. Why? So they can get a fine woman. If you tell your daughters and your granddaughters, do not date a man like that, after a while, if all they got to pick from is the ugly muglies, they're going to stop that. But when you see these women, a lot of women, I've been to prisons, some of the women, they're absolutely gorgeous. What are you doing in prison? I was holding drugs for my boyfriend. They were at my house, whatever.
Yes.
Why are you with a man like that? What I'm saying is, women, we can change the dynamic. We can make sure our daughters are selective about who they date. And then if men realize, hey, I can't really get a woman of quality or anything that looks good if I'm going to do drugs or do that kind of stuff, maybe I'll finish high school.
Right.
Maybe I'll go to college. Maybe I'll get a civil service job because that's the only way I'm going to get a woman. Believe me, you'll be surprised how many women will change when they realize they can't get a woman, a decent woman, a fine woman, because of what they do. We can change it from the ground up, women, and we can make sure that all our kids and relatives vote. Make sure they vote. Make sure they see you vote. It's very important. Please, especially this year, don't throw this year away. Be scared. I want you to be scared because I'm scared. Because I know that a whole lot of people out there who do not look like us and who we may work with and we may get along with and have lunch with, and they so sweet and they so nice and we think they're so liberal. When they get in that voting booth,
Whoa.
when they get in that voting booth,
Talk about
you
it.
don't know what they're going to do.
Talk
'Cause let me
about
tell you
it.
something. Let me tell you something, and I'll shut up. What
You
the
don't have
Republicans have done over the last 25 years is convince white people that they are the party of white people. They are the party of rich white people. But they have convinced all white people that that is their party. They have convinced everybody, the white people, that the Democrats are the party of us, the mud people. And you see in news clips, and Bob will bear this out, you see in news clips, the cameramen, who are usually not from our community, will take pictures of Hillary only when she's hugging a black person. You check that. This is what they have done. So this person is not black and says, well, I don't like Trump, but he stands for me. And then there are people who want to throw their votes away on a man who can't even remember the president of North Korea, on a woman we never heard of. Oh, I'm a vote for them, because I don't want to vote for either one. You cannot afford not to vote for either one. You cannot throw your vote away this time, and you cannot be sure that this man will not be elected. Don't tell that to anybody. even though we secretly, don't think so.
All right, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Could I just add one important footnote before we move on, Bob? To Ann's point, it's broader than the presidential elections because we've got to watch every election at every single stage of this.
Yes.
The presidential election is critical, but we see what happens particularly on off presidential years, and we see the swing. But let me tell you, you got to know who you're voting for on who's the DA, who's prosecuting in our community, who's on the bench,
Yes.
who's on the school board. The mayor appoints the police chief, and then we have all of these police officers shooting folk and walking. We got to pay attention to every election and every referendum on the ballot. At the end, and then I'm back to you. You want to go next?
I was just going to add that pay attention to what Ann was saying and Judge Hatchett was saying. There's a lot of Senate and Congress seats up. I think
Right.
88% are going to be up for voting. Remember, in Obama's first term, he couldn't get anything done. Remember that? They tried to stall him out. And then in 2008, they made it, in 2012, they made it real difficult to get him back in office. Remember, we got to get in there and get those seats as well.
Yeah, it's
Just
a down
know,
ballot. ladies and
historically,
gentlemen. You hear
the
that
way
term
the
used,
Constitution,
down ballot.
the way the Constitution, I'm sorry, Bob. The Constitution is the way it's established. Each member of Congress is elected every 2 years. Every 2 years. Not just in the presidential election year, and members of the U.S. Senate are elected every 6 years, so 1/3 of the U.S. Senate will be elected up for election this year. And every 2 years means on the national level, we got to pay attention. All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Bob.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just reiterating what you're saying. Basically, it's the down ballot. You hear that term used a lot, right? On television, you hear the people on television, the newscasters talk about the down ballot. Well, that's the Congress race and the race for a senator and all that kind of stuff. That's up for grabs as well. And there's going to be a big swing. I'm going to give you another term they use, and they talk a lot about when it's fixed. The Republicans have, since we don't go to the polls every other year, as we always just vote for the main office, the President of the United States, we don't follow up on it. They've managed to gerrymander, that is, fix the Congress.
Ooh, say it again, Bob.
All right, gerrymandering is to arrange it so you've got a majority of the seats. That's the problem. We didn't go back to the polls 2 years later and vote for our guys, and they got wiped out. And so they fixed it so the Republicans control it. Well, we've got to get that back, and there's a chance that we can do it if we go out and vote.
And who sat on that? Democrats.
Yes.
Democrats let them do it. And the first time that Obama was elected, we had a majority of Democrats in the House and Senate. You know what? But they didn't back him. They were scared. They didn't do anything. We need to vote them out of office. Vote them out of office. Vote the right people in. And like the judge says, on all levels. God help Brooklyn if we get a lousy prosecutor after Ken Thompson.
So I just want to jump in there and ask, how many people in this room are from New York? That's a majority of the room. And so everything that everyone's talking about right now has to do with the people that work in Washington, D.C. But the capital of New York is in Albany. And I am the state director of the Drug Policy Alliance. And I will tell you that for the last 6 years, the Senate Republicans in the state of New York have stopped you from getting police reform, have stopped you from getting health care, have stopped you from getting school taxes. Because the conversation that we usually have is about what's happening in Washington. But in New York, we need to have a conversation about what's happening in Albany. You have senators, you have assembly people, you have city council people. The stop and frisk stuff, you know, a lot of people give love to de Blasio about that. A lot of people give the council people a lot of love for that. But they didn't wake up. No elected official wakes up one day and decides to do what is right. No one wakes up that way. What happens is that people are in the street fighting and yelling and marching and going to individual meetings with elected officials and telling them, we will vote you out. The reason why they ended stop and frisk was a court decision from the Center of Constitutional Rights that worked with NYCLU, that worked with the Communities United for Police Reform, which is made of all these small community-based organizations that have gone every day and lobbied individual local elected officials. If I asked most of people in this room if they could name their assembly person or their senator or their city council member, I'm pretty sure we'd have to go through a remedial course. Some people didn't even know Ken Thompson was the DA. All politics are local. In New York, Governor Cuomo just did his eulogy on Ken Thompson, and he talked about how he signed an executive order for special prosecutor, basically making it important for the Attorney General to prosecute police officers that harm us. He didn't do that because he woke up and felt good that day. We've been fighting for a special prosecutor in New York long before Eric Garner was choked out, when Anthony Bias was choked out in 1994. The conversation that we're having is cyclical. And it's cyclical because we need the civic engagement of the people in this room at the local level. You need to hold your assembly members accountable.
Say it again, say it again.
You need to hold your senators accountable. And to be very clear, some of the people that I have the most problems with are the people that look like you and me.
Keep it real.
If you meet me on the side, I'll tell you how your assembly member and your senator went. We have real problems in this country. We have amazing problems, huge, astronomical problems in New York State. Do you think New York City runs Albany? Hell no. Central and Western New York gerrymandered New York State. The only way that was able to be fixed was when Democrats had the power for 2 years, but then we lost our spine, and now it's back with the Senate Republicans, and we can't get done. Yeah. I'm sitting next to a pastor. The conversation is we are losing at Washington, but we are losing a lot closer to home.
All right, let me, before we turn our attention to the audience, let me add a little footnote about Ken Thompson. His name has come up a couple of times. Bob Slade, Ann Tripp, myself, James M. Toomey, we got an opportunity to know Ken Thompson very well. He was on our show a number of times during the course of his election. When he got elected, and again, this shows how important votes are, voting. And as Ann suggested, Ken Thompson developed a review process on convictions that were believed to be improper. He eventually, as Ann said, vacated and discharged about between 21 and 25 cases of people who were serving in jail anywhere from 5 to 18 to 20 years, wrongfully convicted. We had him on the show, and I asked Ken this question. I said, Ken, is all of this unique to Brooklyn? And he said, no, Bob Pickett, it isn't. It's the same situation in Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens, but we don't have a person sitting in the DA office who's responsible and willing to take the initiative to look into these kind of cases. Ken Thompson estimated that there are probably anywhere between 100 cases like that in each borough. Each borough. People who were wrongfully convicted by crooked cops.
Not to mention nationally.
Nationally. All right, so here's my question, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to pose two questions. One regarding police officers and what they do. We know how many people have been killed by police officers, not only in New York, but around the country. And some people describe our police officers as the new KKK. Do you understand what that means? They are hired, they are employed to keep us in check and to make sure that we don't get out of hand. Here's my first question. What can we do? What's the best solution to stop police officers from killing our young men? And here's my second question. Black folks, and we got to talk honestly, this is a hard subject, but when do we start looking at the crime that's committed in our own communities by people who look like us?
Yes, say it, Bob. Now, come on.
All right, one more time. When do we
Yes.
start talking about people who commit crime that looks like us? They're killing other people. They're killing our mothers, our fathers, our sisters. When do we start talking about black to black crime? Brother Mtume coined that
Yes,
phrase.
he did. Yes, he did.
Let me just say this quickly.
All right, Reverend Bishop, all yours.
I am the son of a police officer. My father was a cop in New York City for 25 years. He died in 2005, and he lived in Harlem where he policed. And a couple of things. The first thing I'm thinking of is one of the things that we're doing in a lot of the activism that we're doing is saying that police officers need to live in the communities where they police. And the reason for that is, and they say, you hear these cops saying, "Oh, I'm scared." If you live right, if you doing people right, you're not afraid to live around the people that you police, because you're not gonna have no problems. My father never had an issue. I got locked up with dudes who got locked up by my father, and they told me, "Yo, your father was fair." That's the best thing that you can say about a police officer. So that's one thing. Cops need to live in the communities where they come from. Here's the other thing: is we need to really start talking about. And I'm talking about sentiment driving policy. One of the things that you see over and over again on the law books, and I'll defer to Judge Hatchett for this because she would know better than me, but I know that there's laws on the books that a police officer says that they can kill someone when they feel like their life is in danger, and there's no narrow interpretation of that law.
It is true, and that case is, to your point, Bishop, that case has actually gone all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court in a decision, Graham. And what that basically says, that if at any time I feel that my life is threatened or the life of someone else, I can use lethal force. And what I am telling you is that broad interpretation has given a lot of police officers, has given them a free pass. In Minnesota, it is no secret, I'm representing Philando Castile's family.
Yes.
I am very proud. I'm very proud to be doing that. Because I can't sit at home anymore and curse at the TV. I can't. But what I am saying is that in Minnesota, there has never, ever been a police officer indicted. We're not talking about conviction. We're talking about indicted in the history of Minnesota. Now, obviously, there are cases that are justified. But to your point, that decision in Graham, that U.S. Supreme Court decision in Graham is a problem. I am hoping, and I am doing everything humanly possible such that there will be a new decision in federal court. I'm going to file in federal court. I want this to be the tipping point, because I think that this case can have the impact of us having a current day Brown versus Board that we had in segregation. We have got to change the way that courts are interpreting this decision and the way it's being applied, because this has to be more than, I think maybe my life is threatened here. I mean, there has got to be a far more reasonable standard than that. And why can't we tase folk? Why does it have to be lethal weapon?
Well, then what they'll do is they'll just say that they tased you like they did Walter Scott in South Carolina, and have he dragging his taser around and to throw the taser on the ground next to his body after they done killed the man. So what I'm saying is that once we start looking at these laws that are on the books and start narrowing the interpretation of it so the police officers can actually be held accountable, then the next thing we need to do is ask the federal government to change the way we fundamentally train our police departments. Because first of all, the root of a thing determines the fruit of a thing. And the root of precincts came from when they set up precincts to stop slaves from running away. So why would you not think that precincts are not still there to keep slaves from misbehaving? Somebody need to say amen up in here.
Amen. Amen.
So the first, we need to understand that the precincts, the root of the precinct is what determines the fruit of the precinct. And the fruit of the precinct is that they police us different than police other people because they were created to police us in the first daggone place.
The new KK.
So, while there are police officers who, like my dad, who go to work every day and do a great job, the root of the way that they are trained fundamentally determines the way that they're going to behave in the line of fire. And the only time you'll ever see a police officer convicted is like the case of Akai Gurley in Brooklyn, because the cop didn't feel like his life was threatened. He was just scared to death being in the daggone staircase in the projects. And if you're scared to death, you need not be a police department, a police officer. Because I done walked the staircase in the projects all my life, and I ain't never had a gun, and I still ain't never scared. Even as a pastor, a preacher, a bishop in the Lord's church, I ain't never gonna be scared of my people. And until we stop being scared of ourselves, until we stop accepting the narrative that has been passed down to us and on us and through us and about us, and start looking at each other, and I can look at this brother and I say, this is my brother. I do not fear him. I love him, and there's nothing he can do about it. I don't care if he's Christian. I don't care if he's Muslim. I don't care if he's gay. I don't care if he's light-skinned. I don't care if he's dark-skinned. I love him, and I'm going to treat him with the respect that he deserves, because that is my brother.
Bishop, okay, I heard all of that, and it was powerful. Now, let's put the heat on what we do to each other. What's your solution for that?
My solution for that is, first of all, to stop accepting the narrative that has been given to us about us and start creating our own narrative. Stop accepting the narrative of the angry black man. Stop, even though I am an angry black man, but my anger is not outwardly, my anger is inwardly focused. That's the title of my book, How I Became an Angry Black Man, because I'm mad at myself because of what I did to myself, because I did not know myself. So once we begin to know ourselves and we begin to do different and we begin to act different, and then we will not accept that we have to accept that what they said back in the days, there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. So the statistics a lot of times that come out about us are not for us. And any statistic can be skewed to benefit anybody. Somebody say Donald Trump. So we need to understand that we have to stop looking at these statistics and start looking at each other. And just like the sister said, stop looking at everything on a national basis, because at the end of the day, the trickle down of the way politics work is we have to look right there in our own backyard. I know exactly who my congressman is. I know exactly who Gregory Meeks is. I know exactly who Donovan Richards is. I know exactly who all of these people. I have personal relationships with them. I call them on their phone and they better call me back, because I had to stand in the pulpit every Sunday and say, Donovan Richards didn't call me back. I can't tell you who to vote for, but he ain't called me back. So we need to start doing that and using the collateral that we have in our own communities to affect how our communities are policed, how they're run, and how they're politicized. And we have to understand that politics is a two-part word. Poly means many, and ticks are blood-sucking insects.
We call it, Bishop, we call it politricks.
Yeah, we call it politricks because they're playing tricks on you. Well, let me just piggyback on what brother said. And this is very, very important, ladies and gentlemen. And when we have our open line town halls, we always do this, sort of kind of at the beginning. The problem with our community is that we don't talk to each other anymore, like Bishop said. Back in the day, the next door neighbor knew your mom, knew you, and would tell on you if you got in trouble. We don't have that anymore. We don't do that anymore. So we're going to take just 1 second, ladies and gentlemen, for you to take a look at the person on your left and your right. Shake that person's hand. Say, hi, I'm so. Just do this right now. It's not going to take but a second. Just identify. Yeah, that's it. Meet that person. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. Come on, you can do it. We need to do that. We need to get back to that. We don't do that anymore. That's it.
How are you?
Come on. There you go.
All right. All right.
We treat each other like strangers. We can help solve crime better than the daggone cops.
That's right.
And we can tell them who the bad guys are. But the cops treat us all like we're bad. And that's got to stop.
Yes,
the only way it stops is for us to take action.
It has been my privilege to get to know each and every one of you on this panel today. And I just thank you for the integrity, for the sincerity, for your work, for not cowering from it, and for each of you using your power for good. Because if we don't figure out what we do here and now that lives beyond us to make it better, not for just the people in our immediate circle, but for everybody, then, really, what purpose have we served in this world? And I mean that. And then the Castile press conference, I said it on the earlier panel, I'm going to say it one more time, that we have got to get to the place where we move from the rhetoric to the reality of systemic reform that moves us to a higher ground in this nation. Because I got enough to explain to the good Lord when I get to the pearly gates. I don't want to explain why I sat on my ass when I had the power to make a difference in this world and I said nothing. And if you got the power to make a change and you say nothing because you cower, then you ought not have the power. And I don't think that God brought us through slavery, through the indignations of a segregated South. Because I'm old enough to remember Atlanta, Georgia, and the first word I knew how to read was colored. I know that God did not bring us through the empty promises of, an affirmative action for us to get to a new millennium, not just a new decade, but a new millennium for us to give up. And if they could organize a civil rights movement with no cell phones, no internet, no social media, all of that, tell me that we can't do better now.
Yeah. Whoa.
That's yes. She did that.
Yeah, let's hear it one more time for the judge. One more time.